Okay, Mike.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We'll call the public safety meeting to order at 9 a.m. If you have a cell phone, please mute it or turn it
I
off.
use the microphone. I can't hear you.
How about that?
There you go.
I can't snore. Okay, if you have a cell phone, please mute or turn it off if you would, please. Becky, if you do roll call. Sure.
Mike Copine,
Here.
John Nicholson, Marilyn Shippert,
Present.
Dean Hudson,
Present.
Jack Scrogstad,
Here.
Mike Seaman.
Here.
Okay, we'll go to the visitors. Stacy, do you have anything to bring up?
TV screens look really nice.
Wait till we get all three. I'm so
Fantastic.
excited.
I just couldn't find the popcorn.
It's sharp.
So Mike, I was very busy gabbing right before the meeting, answering some questions, and I didn't get a chance. And I don't know if Becky got a chance to point out to you that we revised your agenda a little bit. And so for you guys out in the room, we've revised this. And so that this section of the agenda will be focused on public visitors. And then, Mike, if you follow down your agenda, we've actually restructured. This is all in preparation for things changing and committee structures changing after December 1. We're kind of getting some practice at this. So what we've designed here is that we're going to go through the individual departments. And when your department gives a report, if you have any action items, you'll deal with that action item at that time. That will allow good use of your time in that you can come in, give your report, take care of your action items, and you could leave if you needed to. Not that you have to, but you could. And so we think it's going to provide a little bit more structured environment for both sides of the table, both for the department heads, for the public, and for your board members. So we changed things on you, Mike. I was going to talk to you about that, but I got busy.
Well, that's all right. I noticed the change, but I thought we'd learn what the change was about when I got up here. So I
All
wasn't.
right. So
wasn't
at this
really-
point in time, it's just if there's any public visitors, and I don't see any, so then you can start rolling down the rest of it.
Okay, very good. Did everybody have a chance to look at last month's meetings? If so, are there any changes, corrections, additions, omissions? If not, they'll stand approved as read. Okay, so we'll now start, I guess, into the department heads. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And Amy's up with the circuit clerk. We did this in alphabetical order, and this order will stay the same so that you can again judge about when your report and your action items would be addressed. If that makes sense.
Makes sense. Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't have a lot to report. This morning, my office did do a little bit of training with Ed Stewart on active shooter and evacuation procedures. It was very helpful and informative. I do have about 3 newer employees who have never been through that. So that was very good for the office, and we definitely need that. And I don't have any action items. So that is all I really have today.
That's no worries. But if you ever did, then you could deal with them all at the same time under your office report. So that's at least this is the way we're envisioning it for now.
All right, Wendy. Okay. Bear with me for just a minute here where I find myself again.
While Mike's finding
There.
himself over there, John, since you just came in the room, I'll just give you a real quick overview. We've kind of restructured the agenda for all the committees. This is kind of in preparation for the consolidation of committees after December 1. But what it means to you today and for the next couple of months is that we are restructuring the agenda so that when you
This
give
is
your
scary.
report, if you have any action items, you'll deal with those action items right then and there under your report. And then if you needed to leave, or if you needed to come in a few minutes late, your action items and your report will all be grouped together. Right now, we've got them on the agenda. And by the way, the 3 screens up here, one of these is going to have the agenda up here so for those of you sitting in the room that don't have the access to the tablets, we'll be displaying that when we get this all done. We're a couple of weeks out from being completed on this. But in any case, as we scroll down the agenda, the department heads are put in alphabetical order. So circuit clerk came up first, sheriff obviously has an S. You'll be a little bit later down on the agenda. But the key thing here is that when we get to you, you will deal with anything that you need from this committee to move forward. Are you ready, Mike? Did I talk long enough?
Try it again. I'm here now. Okay. Any questions of Amy? Okay, thanks. Mr. Lally, EMA.
The assisted at depot days again this year. Didn't end like we wanted to, a little bit of rain, a little bit of lightning, but except for that, they were pretty successful, no injuries. I didn't win the $99,000, so I'm upset, but
I got stuck at home. I tested positive on Saturday, so I didn't do anything. When we spoke, it was commented you thought you may have had some damage, and if I'm out of line on this, Wendy, you can stop me if you'd like to, but I was just curious, did you have any further diagnosis of those pieces of equipment?
yeah, we did have a few losses down there. The wind caught one of our pop-up tents that needs to be replaced. Had a camera that either small strike of lightning hit it or it's water damage. And we had a problem with the TV and the big display like you have here in the trailer that reflects that. So. Anything else? So yeah, we did have a few things, but it's a good trial run for the trailer to ensure that it's ready for a larger event. Oh, you forgot the most important. The coffee maker failed, but couldn't make coffee. He definitely was upset. Yeah, yeah.
That goes to the top of the list. Well, as much as I research on YouTube, somebody, and I had to turn it off and walk away from it, but somebody was commenting on the trailer. Why did we need a trailer? And I probably still have teeth marks in my tongue, so I just kind of walked away from that and didn't respond to the person.
I'd rather have it that way than why did we need it? Than if something happened, why wasn't it there? That's my comment.
Well, I think it went a little bit further than that. That's why I shut it off. So
But we're working on new innovations down there. So didn't get out. We actually had three departments parked across the intersection to try to prevent anybody from driving down in the midst of it. We'll continue to work on that. It's sad to say it's just happening in this world. I'm going for some donations for some Jersey barriers that are water fillable, easily moved. Work with the city of Dixon getting rockets down for the Virginia Festival. They work well. So we're going to try to duplicate that and have something out there.
and if I remember right, you responded to an accident or something that had some chemical or something.
Paul hazmat out in the tollway. Yeah. With a do it best trailer had 84 pounds of hazmat on it. Took care of that report. That any hazmat spill needs to be reported to the state, not only by me when I'm notified, but by the spiller also. So I always call the spiller, help them out and say, please report this and we can find. So kind of brings.
Okay.
So Mike, to answer your question, that was right on target, because at this point in the agenda, it's all about Kevin. So if anybody has any questions for Kevin, this was the time to do it.
Are there any questions? Any questions at all? I will have to admit in front of all of you that I get pretty defensive when the people start attacking our EMA program or the director or anything, and I have to subdue myself pretty good. But I could get nasty and I don't want to. Okay. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate the support.
Okay, Sheriff's Office.
Morning.
Morning.
We're going through our 2-week hell period throughout the year where we've got 8 people off during this next 2 weeks. So we're gonna be down in the patrol division. So that means chief deputy, patrol lieutenant, myself, we're gonna be out on patrol probably the next couple of weeks periodically. Got 2, 1 in the academy, 2 on a field training program that cannot be out on their own yet. Got 1 still deployed to the National Guard, and we've got 3 out on various injuries or medical leaves. So the next 2 weeks are going to be a nightmare. but we'll get through it as best we can. To echo a little bit on what Kevin said about the depot days and the various events that Kevin helps out with throughout the year anyway. He does a really nice job of getting all the agencies organized, the paperwork taken care of, the operational plans up front. And we have been planning for some of these events and actually a little bit more robust in our plans just because of the events around the world. To some, it might seem like a little overkill, but to us, like Kevin said, I'd rather have the resources there and ready to go in the event that something does happen. And thankfully, nothing has yet, but it's hit rather close to home. And so we want to be prepared. So that's probably, I hope, what's going to happen in the future. Certainly convey that to the new sheriff as to what we've been doing with the various events around the county. And hopefully he will be in favor of continuing that. But other than that, I don't think I've got anything else right now.
Okay,
Mike, when I redesigned the agenda, I forgot probation. So, so I will add you next month. Stacey. I'm so sorry.
If you guys had seen how many times we redesigned these agendas this last month, trying to get this just right, I'm not surprised, but please accept our apology, Stacy. It's not that you're not important to us.
No worries.
So this might be the appropriate time to call for Stacy unless anybody has any questions for John.
thanks, Sheriff. I appreciate it. Thanks for the extra coverage for Amboy during depot days and the other celebrations. I know that you guys cover it pretty good. When you've got the personnel, there's usually some extra people there on behalf of the sheriff's department, and that's appreciated. Okay, thanks, Sheriff. No questions? Stacy?
We recently received a letter from the state in regards to the amount of reimbursement that the county will receive for the probation and court services department. It typically comes out about July, August. It was just a little bit later this year. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $475,000. So that'll be a reimbursement back to the county for the salaries within our office. We were very fortunate again this year to be reimbursed at 100%. This is, I believe, our 4th year at 100%, which is very out of the ordinary. Many years in the past, we were reimbursed at a rate somewhere between 74 to 86%. So being at 100% is a nice windfall for the county to be able to take for that reimbursement.
Great, good news.
As
Keep
far as-
going. We like to hear stuff like that.
That's about where it stops. As far as what's going on in my office, we're just trying to keep up with everything that's taking place in the courtroom. It's very busy. We've got a lot of demand on our office. So we're just keeping up with all the fast-paced work that's being done in the courtrooms. That's all that I have. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Stacy? Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate it. Okay. I jumped over the coroner's office and the judges. Nobody here for those.
So after some consideration, we decided that they would stay on the agenda, even though they don't typically attend, but should they ever attend or need something from this committee, we would keep it on the agenda. So it's going to be probably common that you would skip over that one, but we're going to leave it there just in case they do need something from you.
Okay. Okay, quarterly update on dangerous and abandoned properties. That is still an ongoing situation and will continue to be such. However, Thursday before the Labor Day weekend, I got a call in reference to a location, and I'm only going to bring it up because it was mentioned earlier in the committee's discussions on areas to target for condemnation or destruction or whatever, that being the Lee Center School. The Lee Center School has been purchased through tax auctions, and I got a call Thursday night before the Labor Day weekend that there was apparently going to be or was being planned a rave or an inside party to be conducted at that facility. There's no lights, there's no sewer, there's no water. The majority of the windows are broken out of the building. So I think we're going to pick up on that and also check to see about having it posted for being uninhabitable. That property was purchased by the same individual that owns the property at Robbins Road and Route 30. So if you've been by Robbins Road and Route 30 and know what it looks like, that's that's one of the major concerns of the people in Lee Center right now, is that it doesn't end up like that. So I think, Charlie, I apologize, I haven't bothered you with it yet, but I'll just probably run that by you after our meeting here for just a minute, just to put it in the picture. There's,
That would probably even notify Mr. Zollins to let him know what the intent is. And the health department too, Jennifer called, was very helpful over in Franklin Grove, Ocean High School, the old high school, to keep people coming in and out of that. You know,
I think there is open access to it, that, I mean, it had, I'm speaking of the Lee Center School now, that it needs to be closed up, boarded up, so that nobody can make access to it. It's readily access. Once you can get inside the building, you can go all over the place inside. So that'll be one that we're going to try to pick up on and try to prevent from accumulating another bad spot like we have with the other one. So anybody have any questions on that at all?
No question, Mike, but speaking of the state's attorney, we skipped over the state's attorney's report. He's over here eagerly ready to go, right?
No, he's over there doing this. I made it.
So I was just gonna have you circle back a little bit higher on the agenda to his report.
I think with where we're at right now, we're close enough. We'll just go, all right. State attorney's office is next, so you're on.
So we've been keeping pretty busy, keeping Stacy busy. We've had several cases coming through in the last month and a half or so, getting through dispositions on them. I think in the last 2 months, we've closed out 44 felonies, filed about 56 felonies. We're focusing right now on trying to obtain orders of protection when it comes to our sex assault cases, when it comes to our domestic violence cases. Every case is going to be a case by case basis, but if we can help out victims in terms of sexual abuse, sexual assault cases, so they don't have to come in, don't have to face this abuser at the time, we can file those in the criminal case, and it makes it a little bit easier on them, and it tracks with the criminal case. So we've been trying to do more of that to kind of help out the victims. So we've been staying busy with that. We've got a busy trial calendar right now going through January. We've got several open pleas, or what we call blind pleas, where we're set for sentencing hearings coming up in the next month and a half, hoping to resolve some of the cases that have been in the backlog that we've talked about before, amping up for Pretrial Fairness Act stuff that's going to start in January 1st. As you see in one of the agenda items on here, is the additional assistant state's attorney that we requested through the budget process. And I think preliminarily it's been approved through finance in what I've received in an email. So that's what we're looking for, trying to get that funding a little bit early, because we did encounter an applicant that we think would be a good fit for the county. She has a background in municipal and county law. She's got about 10 years of experience, and we're getting her at a pretty good cost. So trying to get her here as quick as we can, so long as we have the support of the county board to do so. Like I said, she's been doing a lot of the civil work that I think the county is looking to have amp up a little bit more too. So I think that'd be good for the county. We look at the abandoned properties. We look at some of the issues that come from the health department, some of the issues that come from zoning. Primarily, it's been Brian and myself that are handling most of those. So to have somebody else that's going to be able to tag team with that as well would be good for us. So that's what I'm looking for, at least from this committee right now, is just the support moving forward in terms of the additional assistant state's attorney. Again, it was within the range that I had requested for the budget talks, and I think has been preliminarily approved. On a side note, I think is interesting too, Chairman Olson was able to attend court last week and see what we were doing. I know Keen and Jack are pretty intimately aware of what happens over there, but he gets done and he just says, I can't believe you guys are doing all this over here. So if anybody's interested in seeing what it is we do across the street, feel free to drop in. We're happy to have you there. Do you want me to jump into the collection stuff too while I'm here?
You might as well, then we
Okay.
got that out of the way too.
In terms of the collections, last month, we received it on August 31st. I don't have anything for September yet. Total collections received was $4,519.06. Becky, let me know if you need me to say that again. 45,1906. Total received as date is 47,101.54. That's just for this year.
Charlie, and I know without having somebody monitor it on a regular basis, what's the general turnaround on some of the collections that they've gone after?
It really does ebb and flow depending on whether or not they're actually able to obtain service on these folks up front. I'd say a general turnaround, you'd be looking at somewhere between optimistically 4 months on up to 9 months to see any type of progress.
Thank you.
With the tax intercept stuff and what we've looked at for employment garnishing, that's some of the stuff that we can dip into as well.
Okay, thanks. Yes, ma'am.
On Charlie's report, he talked about a new hire. Is this somebody you're gonna bring on before the budget cycle?
That's what I would like to do.
So you want us to say that, give us your stamp, our stamp of approval on that?
Correct, yep.
Okay, I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Got that, Becky?
The motion is the Public Safety Committee supports state's attorney's recommendation to bring the new hire on board before December 1st.
And I will just confirm that Finance Committee did approve in the tentative budget that will be presented to you next month, it did approve the hiring of this position. So it's already going to be budgeted for next year.
But we're just doing the interim.
Correct. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Implication, Charlie, is she's already on staff.
I'm sorry?
Is that individual already on staff?
No, she is not. So what it is that if I get the go ahead from finance and then the full board next week, that would be my choice is to try to bring her on staff right away. Yep.
Experience, just out of college?
No, 10 years experience. She's been licensed since I think 2010, 2011. She's been working, like I said, doing municipal and county law. She's been up in Milwaukee doing a lot of that, but she's coming back down here and wants to reside in Franklin Grove.
Good.
Yeah.
From Franklin Grove, Virginia?
No,
Oh.
she just came down here, really fell in love
That's a
with,
great little community.
fell in love with small town living,
That's good. I'm glad. to hear that.
bringing a whole family with.
The whole family?
Yep.
Very,
Yep.
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 Glad to hear that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to support the state's attorney in the hiring of a new person for the office to continue activities there. Any discussion? Any more questions or anything? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Wendy, under other businesses, is that the same as old business?
Yes. Yes, and you've already addressed that item, I think, earlier, correct?
Correct.
And we
But
didn't,
that is the Lee Center School, not the Lee County School.
Right, that
Yes,
should read,
Lisa.
we probably ought to break that down and identify it a little closer to the Lee Center School. And I did comment on that a little bit already. There again, have there been any questions pop up for anybody in reference to it? Yes.
Do you want the health department to get involved in this time? Get it posted?
I would like to see it. I'm in anticipation that it's going to end up like the other location, and I would like to try to be ahead of that rather than behind it. Sure.
Just a question, who's spearheading this? These abandoned properties, because we're getting information as well. And I got a hold of the fire chief for that district that does inspections for these types of properties. He's already got history with that property anyway. Is doing other inspections. We did a GIS locate on the owner, and it's not the person that we thought it would be yet, unless that transaction was just done within the last couple of weeks, and it takes time to get that incorporated. And Wendy's shaking her head, yes. So
Yeah.
that very well could have happened, but I want to make sure that this is somewhat streamlined, because if we're getting information, you've got information, the state's attorney does or does not have information on it, it's kind of spattered all over the place, and we don't know where it's going. Health department was going to be contacted by us as well. So if somebody else is running this, like zoning, that's the logical place for all of it to start. And then zoning makes the contacts to the fire chief and the health department. That's great. And then we know who has to handle that. But from an enforcement side, obviously, we're, from the rave party rumors and things like that happening, or anybody that might be staying there. If you hear about these things before we do, I think from an enforcement standpoint, we need to be notified as well and not wait for the next public safety committee meeting. So I guess I'm just looking for who is coordinating these abandoned properties and who's making the notifications to all the affected parties.
Commissioner Nicholson.
Microphone.
Sorry.
I know that, John, but the sheriff's department has rarely, if ever, been notified of these actions that are taking place, so that we're not stepping on someone else's toes and doing the job that you want us to do as well.
And I think the sheriff's point, I didn't know anything about the raves. I didn't know anything about that coming up. I know that there was maybe something at the old Eldina school, but about a couple months ago
Right.
that we had talked about, but that was the only one I heard of.
Quash was put on that from what I understand. And yeah, I was unaware of the activity out at Lee Center School until Wendy called the other day that had been repurchased by the individual that's got the property at Reynolds Route 38. And right away that set up a bunch of red flags. So this is all new information for even the committee. Sure.
Well, I'll take responsibility of that. If you want to use the term heading it or whatever, I'll take the responsibility for that also, because I got the call. Sheriff, I did reach out via text to see that if you were familiar with it so that we could talk about it. Being a holiday weekend, I didn't get too upset about it or too worried about it. I had a couple of people that could monitor this activity if there were some there, and I asked if they would just call if they did notice. I did pass that on then to Amboy PD via one of the officers that was going to be working that night, who isn't now. And I thought, well, rather than try to get the ball rolling on the holiday weekend, I knew we had this meeting coming up. I would bring it before Mr. Nicholson and Mr. Boonstra and pick up on that and make a determination as far as considering the condemning of it or posting of it. It's been sitting there for 10 or 15 years and nothing has been done. So if you want to, if I need to claim the label of being the spearhead for it, I'm your spearhead and I've thrown the first spear. So I just wanted to bring it up today so it can come to light and we can possibly prevent a second location like we have. And yes, I did have conversation with Wendy in reference to tax auction and the potential purchase of the individual. Granted, it hasn't taken place yet. It isn't a completed transaction. But I think for what time it takes sometimes to get the buildings posted and everything, now was the time to get the ball rolling and go from there. And we had good conversation as far as the taxes or the purchase of the facility and what direction we think it may or could go. And there's a couple of different directions. I am not going to sit up here as chair of the Public Safety Committee and try to incur more expense for the county board. And that's some of the discussion that Wendy and I had on the phone. We have
So,
another
John,
property. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Mike, to fill in the blanks a little bit, the potential owner has bid on it at the annual auction of properties that have unpaid taxes. It's working its way through a Josephine Meyers process. I didn't know anything about it till Mike called, and a little research, we figured that out. That's what he's referring to with regard to the tax sale. So this person has bid on the property that we are surmising will end up owning the property. That's what we know at this point. But to your point, John, I'm trying to facilitate the process, not just the notification if there's a rave or whatever going on, but rather the kind of the abandoned property process. And I'm trying to get something down in writing because John, of course, as everyone knows, is not going to be on the board in a few months. And so I'm trying to get something a little bit down in writing in terms of steps in a process. And I'm very intrigued by, because it didn't occur to me that the first step is probably notification to the appropriate county officials. So I would very much like to, after this meeting, just touch base with you real quick about what that would look like and who that is. I think you've listed most of them, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. So when I put down this process, this is the first thing that happens when something like this comes to light. I want to make sure I've got everybody that should be notified or included in those communications.
It's not dissimilar to the Magnuson Hotel. I know it's not really an abandoned property, but it was property we were having a lot of discussions about, and certainly from our end, we were having a lot of enforcement issues there. And we brought a group of people together, and I think although it takes longer than everybody wants it to take, the group of people that got together, being the fire chief for that district, the health department, certainly the state's attorney's office, and us, and getting other inspectors involved for that building as well. It's quite a lengthy process, but I think the way we went through that kept the owner involved. You know, here's what you need to improve upon, and if you want your building to continue, we eventually had to shut it down for a period of time as well. So, but everybody was involved in those meetings moving up to that process of eventually shutting them down. So I just want to make sure we have a process in place that we go through that Charlie's comfortable with as well, moving forward on all these properties.
I think you're right. Every property is going to have a unique, it's going to have to be case by case basis. But I think what my goal was is to get some best practices down on paper to make sure that whoever's sitting in the role that John's in right now has an idea that these are some best practices as we work through some of these properties.
And I do agree with the sheriff. I like what we saw come out of the zoning office and how they're going to approach some of the scenarios that they're dealing with. And I do agree with you. I for lack of better terms, if you want to, brainstorm and come up with a chain of command, so to speak, similar to that, but that isn't what it would be called. But we need to have a process from start to middle to finish. Mr. Sproxted.
Is there a way that we could somehow, these particular properties that, that we've noticed or identified, maybe somehow flag it somewhere in the clerk's office, so that if it changes ownership, somehow that we could start then dealing with that new ownership or type of deal. So, we can jump right on it right away. And
Usually we haven't had to worry about that because the general public's been real good about calling and saying, hey, this is going on or that's going on. But I understand what you're saying and I agree with you. I haven't had any issues or hurdles to have to jump over to find out the transition as far as ownership or anything. Somebody within the county offices here has the information that you need one way or the other.
Right.
Well, if there's something that you've got in mind, I'm open to it. And
but I'm just suggesting that, somehow, whether or not we develop a task force for that particular group of people, whether it be county board members, someone from the health department, someone from there, whatever. So when something like this comes up, it'll come to that group And then they can attack it, however, what we want done with it. When something comes up like that.
Mr. Nichols.
So that,
This committee was originally formed with two attorneys, state's attorney and Mr. Zollinger, who specialize in this type of activity. There are two members of the health department on the committee, Jennifer Paul, Getz Ferguson, and Mike, myself, and I can't. remember-
D?
The whole thing initially started with D writing a list of county properties that were questioned. There's been some additions and some subtractions, but by and large stayed pretty much the same. Mr. Zollinger has been doing an excellent job of getting some of this stuff. We went over in Compton, we started out with some of the low hanging fruit, so to speak, to get our feet wet on what it takes to get it done. We've got one in Compton that's under control now that wasn't before.
Because we're sitting here in committee, kind of hashing it out back and forth. I get that's what we're supposed to do, oversee it. But now we're kind of like, well, sheriff's like, well, who's in charge? Who's handling this kind of thing? And we're kind of like going around in circles. And how I'm looking at it here, being a new person looking in, I just think that, I'm not saying we're wasting our time just kind of hashing her out. I think this group or this task force just needs to deal with it and then present it. This is what's going on in this committee and next.
Can I,
I don't want to be, I'm not saying what you guys are doing is wrong. I'm just saying we're just circling the wagon here.
I think you've got a good start. You just need
Right.
some refining on the process. Jack suggested a task force. I don't think we need another committee.
Well,
Task force. We just
yeah.
need focusing on who's in charge of what.
So go ahead, Charlie.
So Jennifer Kolb at the health department has been doing a really good job of keeping track of these properties, keeping track of where the ownership is. In fact, she's doing such a good job that she's actually obtaining knowledge of when a property may be sold to somebody and who that somebody may be. So she's been on the ball with it. In terms of we talk about task force or talk about how the process works. The real issue that comes up is that there's really two avenues that are happening here. There's the enforcement side, like Sheriff's talking about. There's the public safety side, as he's discussing. But then there's the civil avenue that really has different players involved in it and really has a different framework for how we move forward on it. Because, when you go to judicial deed, it really has nothing to do with any of the health department stuff at that point. It has really nothing to do with any of the sheriff stuff at that point. But there is an avenue of information that needs to come to both of those people in order to be able to successfully do their job and make sure that the public is protected.
I think we purposely set it up so it would be a low key committee, so that things didn't get too out in public, so to speak.
Right.
And so if there's ever any information that's needed, I'll be only here a couple more months, but Mr. Payne we keep each other versed on it, and Charlie and Mr. Zollinger are well versed in what's going on. So it's there's been nothing not done, certainly relatively close, but
I guess circling is the wrong term I was saying. It's just that we're throwing out in a public meeting, all these different places and stuff like that.
yeah, we're just
I
trying
just
to
think we just need to get it done.
keep it as good place.
I did, when I spoke with Wendy the other day by phone, I did ask her for the information on the properties that went into this tax auction. And she has sent me all of the paperwork for that, just to compare it with what we are doing as far as abandoned or, dilapidated, to try and keep track of what's going on there. I think we've got a process. We just need to fine tune it and see who we're going to start with first and then go down the line to the next person. So
It's like many other aspects of county government. You don't want everybody in the world knowing what's going on. It makes for mayhem.
And the other issue that I think, Mr. Copian, that you brought up was we have a list that we work through. We try to prioritize that list, but even as we work down that list, there is a real funding issue that comes along with that as well. So I think that's where the breaks are that we may not be seeing right away, is that there are properties that we're addressing, but it takes a little bit more time because we have to make sure that we're able to pay for the demolition or abatement or whatever it may be.
Any other questions or suggestions?
I'm curious if there's a possibility of a process that would eliminate a lot of the time involved from the start date to the finish date. And some of these properties, take months and even into years. And getting on board with all the parties involved, as we already talked about, maybe not to start the shipper said another committee, but at least let those people who are directly going to be involved at the same time, so everybody knows what's going on, and then let that process proceed. And then get those others that need to be involved, instead of this being a lengthy process that sometimes it is. Don't wait till it's almost a major problem, and then we got to start an issue. Just kind of put a flag on some of these properties, like Mr. Booster said, so at least those involved, and for the sake of law enforcement, they can keep a so-called eye on different properties too, to see what's going on around those properties, because they are abandoned.
And some of these properties are major problems. And the only way to expedite the issues like we talk about is throwing money at them. I mean, if you're able to actually get in there, get the judicial deed, or go through the system as quick as possible, which can be pretty quick, you have to be able to move on to that next step, which is demolition or finding a buyer that's going to take it over and take over that responsibility. And that's the part that slows us down quite a bit. I think it's just important to remember that while we do address, like he was talking about the Compton property, we address that one. Again, that's still a process. We talk about the abatement issue that comes along with that, whether or not we need to do any type of abatement, making sure we're complying with all the environmental codes that go along with it. So the only way to really expedite is if we're able to have basically a blank check.
Well, I guess my concern is once again goes to the civil liability, but more to the safety aspect, that if the process can be shortened up where it is definitely determined to be unsafe in that and posted, it actually gives the law enforcement.
Yeah, so health
community,
department does a lot with that.
something to do. Just to maybe wait until something happens and calls have got to be made to who are you going to call about the property, say, hey, it's this guy allowed on the trespass issue.
Correct.
If it's posted, it gives law enforcement something, they can nip this.
But again, to Sheriff's point, he needs to know about it.
Exactly. Like in this case, the sheriff's department is notified, say, by the way, this is in the process and it's been posted. So all personnel are aware of that fact. Eliminates probably on a lot of calls and complaints they may get.
Sure.
I think Mr. Zollinger has, from my last conversation with Wendy on one of the properties, I think he's kind of keeping a due diligence on the properties that we ask him to deal with at the current time. And he's got a good focus on alternate paths to follow that will not eliminate, but possibly reduce the amount of financial impact that it'll have on the county board and the county. Wendy, are we at liberty to discuss the first one that you mentioned to me on the phone? And I'm not trying to keep anything from anybody. I'm trying to keep getting into an area that we need to be cautious of.
It might be getting a little bit too much in the weeds, to Jack's point, because this is one that we've now tagged Mr. Zollinger to deal with, but there was a single property that was on the tax sale auction list. By the way, that list that Mike referred to earlier, that's going to go before this board next month, or not next month, excuse me, next week. These are the Josephine Meyers sales. So what happens is when taxes aren't paid after a specified period of time, our trustee, Josephine Meyer, takes over these properties, administrates them, and ultimately will have an auction. And as a part of this auction, then you, the board, have to sign off and say, yes, you're going to allow these properties to be sold by auction. There's a very distinct process that goes along with that. But to what Mike was referring to is that one of those properties that was on the tax auction has now been withdrawn. Mr. Zollinger, again, because of his expertise in this area, notified us that it was on the tax auction. And perhaps instead of pursuing legal action in the court system, it would be simpler if Lee County just took title through the tax auction process and then continued forward with the demolition. So there's, as I said earlier, all of these properties are going to be on a case by case basis. Things like this are going to come up that are going to completely change the trajectory of where we were going. The good news is Mr. Zollinger is on top of these things and advised us to withdraw that one from the tax sale, which has been done. So we can move forward with that one for demolition. Again, as Charlie points out, pending the dollars available to do the demolition. We did get $100,000 of ARPA money towards this project. But that won't go far with some of these larger schools that, you know, that are on our radar. The asbestos abatement alone is going to make a huge dent in those dollars. So we have to be cautious and careful with what dollars we try to put at which project and how much of a safety issue it is as to where we put our priorities and our time. Did that get to where you wanted to go, Mike?
You did very well, Wendy. I can dance around things, but not that good. That was fantastic. And I don't mean that as a slang term either. It's
I didn't take it that way. I think suffice it to say, you should have confidence that that Mr. Zollinger is doing a great job in trying to give us all opportunities and all avenues for resolving some of these problems that we've got out there.
We are fortunate, by the way, to have Mr. Zollinger to be doing that activity because there are a lot of different alternative methods of approaching the property and how to handle it. I think he's he's very well versed on it. Obviously, and he does a lot of that. So we're very fortunate to have him. Sheriff.
Sorry to start that lengthy discussion we just had. I didn't mean to go that long, but it was worthwhile bringing it up. I think I believe we all see that there needs to be a process and notification in place. And I think you're doing a wonderful job. I think it's a great idea that we're doing this finally, because there is some properties, as we all know, around the county that need to be cleaned up in one way, shape, or form. Question for either Charlie or Wendy. I know it was a year or two ago that we, I think, did away with the tort fund. Is that monies that we can put it back into the tort fund for this type of process? Because going down the road, you're going to continue doing this. And at some point in time, you're going to need some funding to demolish some of these properties. And we all know how expensive that is. Can we start through the budget process, start building that tort fund back up again? And is that an allowable expense for something like this? Just asking.
So the lawyer answer I'm going to give you is it depends. So the reason it depends is because just like Mr. Copine was talking about, like Wendy was talking about, there are different avenues that you can go down in order to address these buildings. If we're not taking ownership over these properties and we're just placing a lien on the property, whatever it may be, I don't think the tort fund is going to apply for that. If it is something that we're taking over and going to retain the property for an extended period of time, if not for years, then maybe that's something we can consider because it would be county property that you're trying to remediate.
I'll also tag onto that I've had some initial conversations with City of Sterling and City of Rock Falls and a little bit to the extent City of Dixon. But those communities have been successful with grants for some of the very expensive asbestos mitigation and demolition. And so that's also an avenue that we need to pursue. And the only reason it hasn't been done to this point is just lack of time on my part. But I have made some initial communications with them and I know they've been successful at it. And it's certainly something we're going to follow up on because John's right. We don't have the dollars to keep funding, especially these large ones. The asbestos abatement alone will be hugely costly and that doesn't get the building tore down. So.
You don't need to apologize about the length of time, Sheriff. I think it turned out for the better anyway. We needed to have this type of information come out so we can fine tune. I like what I said, how zoning office has established their handling procedure. I don't think that we should be any different. It makes it flow a lot more methodically.
Not a good discussion. A question, obviously, for probably Mr. Boonster, is there any type of paperwork ordinance when abandoned property is bought? That something has to be done to that property, update it, make it, habitable within a certain period of time. So we don't go back to another issue again.
So what you're asking is if the county takes over a property? Or is it just if,
It would be like the civilian would buy these property.
oh, sure.
What's your obligations to have to do with that property?
So if they don't do anything with that property, we're right back to square one anyway. We would be able to have the health department either condemning the building or whatever it may be, depending on what the issues are with that. If there's some type of environmental issue, there could be the Illinois Environmental Code coming in or the even federal environmental protection. But to answer your question, there's not a time frame. It's just if it is a unsafe or some type of environmentally problematic property, then it just gets condemned and then you can start the process like we're talking about.
Is there anything that can be put in place that when you purchase said property at sales auction that you must within, say, 24 months, whatever, update it or make this, in other words, take it out of that abandoned series where there is issues with, health issues and whatever.
I don't think you can put conditions on the
Okay.
property, no more than you could on any other private property.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more discussion on? Okay. Thanks again, Sheriff. I think it led us into a very productive conversation this morning. I really do. Okay, moving on, under new business, we don't have anything listed under new business unless somebody needs to bring something up. Wendy?
Nope.
Okay,
Oh, I changed my mind. Sorry. I forgot. So for those of you who've not already heard this from a prior meeting this week, I did lay on your desks a couple pieces of paper coming before the full board finance committee tomorrow morning, but also full board next week will be a broadband project, a broadband grant. And so I mostly today just wanted to give you a heads up about it, give you an opportunity to review it, ask questions if you have any, so that you don't feel a bit blindsided by the time it gets to full board. So what this is about is as you know, the board made some decisions early on with regard to how it would expend its ARPA dollars, and broadband was considered one of the top 5 priorities. We eventually set that aside, number one, because ARPA rules changed, but number two, because we understood through the federal government infrastructure bills that there would be different sets or pots of money for broadband. So we kind of set that aside. Well, we're circled back. We've gone through a process of understanding and learning how to develop a broadband project to get information out. I think you all heard me a month or two ago at a full board meeting talking about a broadband survey. I'm hoping that all of you completed that. We're ready to take it to the next level. So Ogle County, taking the lead, has asked Lee County and numerous other counties to partner on a grant to get what they refer to as the middle mile broadband infrastructure in place. This is not the broadband that will get into individual homes, but rather this is the infrastructure that will get it to the edge of communities. And then from there, private industries can actually tag on that fiber and bring it into the homes themselves. So the overall project, the grant, the total right now for, I believe there were 7 counties on the list that you're looking at. That total grant right now proposal is at about $48 million, of which the county has a portion of that. The private vendor that we're working with has a portion of that for match. So the county's portion right now proposed for match to get the fiber that you're seeing in the red lines on that map would be $1.6, $1.7 million over 5 years. ARPA committee, excuse me, unanimously approved the expenditure of ARPA dollars for that project to move forward. There's been some discussion because, as you know, ARPA dollars have to be expended, allocated prior to the end of 2024 and expended by the end of 2026. So this project for broadband would be a 5-year project. So we'd be really, really close to whether or not we could meet this in the timely manner for ARPA purposes. So it's possible finance will be readdressing the question of whether or not we would support this project with all ARPA dollars or just partly by ARPA dollars. More to follow on that when we get to the full board. For purposes of today, all I wanted to do is put it on your radar that we are moving forward with this public-private partnership, a consortium of counties, Ogle County taking the lead, And we have a private partner that is put forth and is preparing all of the engineering and the grant documents, and they're quite extensive. And the question before the board will be, does Lee County want to participate in this? I will take any questions, or otherwise just absorb the information and let me know between now and the board meeting if you have any questions on the project itself.
I think it's a very interesting thing myself, and broadband is obviously and definitely will be the thing of the future. And I was involved at a level a couple years ago when it first came into Amboy. And I wish more people in the Amboy area would have participated at that point because of what the company that was putting the broadband in was offering. And it wasn't any expense to people at that point. I mean, this was businesses or business entities.
So you'll see from that middle mile redlined map that this project would get the middle mile fiber to essentially all the communities in Dixon, or excuse me, all the communities in Lee County, everything from Ashton, Franklin Grove, Harmon, Amboy, Compton, West Brooklyn, and Paw Paw, and including Dixon. So the other key thing about this, first of all, the grant is only for middle mile. The grant will not get us to the end mile, which is to the actual homes themselves. But the other thing about this grant is two things. They cannot lay fiber where fiber already exists. So they can't go on the other side of Route 26 and lay a new fiber. If there's already fiber there on one side of the road, we have to utilize that fiber and skip over that section and go to a different area. We have to lay fiber, in other words, where fiber doesn't already exist. The other thing we're trying to accomplish with this project, and you don't see it so much on that map right now because I don't have it scaled out to see the region. But the key thing with fiber, in the ground fiber, is to have redundancy by having circular patterns. So you want your fiber laid in a circular pattern. And if something gets cut on the north side, all the traffic gets rerouted to the south side. So this is another key part of this project, is to provide that redundancy by that circular pattern so that if something gets cut or damaged for some reason, there's still, everybody can get still back up and operational in a very, very short turnaround. That's all part of the project. Honestly, the project is so detailed, I could talk about it for hours, but I just wanted to put it on your radar and make sure that you were at least aware of it by the time it gets to full board. I hate it when you're blindsided.
Mr. Nicholson.
There have been Zoom calls, conference calls for the last 12 weeks on this. Each conference call lasted approximately 2 hours. Wendy and I have participated as can. They conflict with some of the meetings we have. But in my opinion, this is probably one of the single best futuristic investments that Lee County Board can make in 20 years down the road. It will enable us to counteract some of the brain drain that we've had because internet not being fast enough for some of the people that want to work at home or can work at home. In my opinion, once this gets going, there's really no downside. It will be a wonderful thing for Lee County residents. And if it's done as proposed, it's going to be basically there's 7 counties involved here and then some downstate that are being involved also. So it's a wonderful thing right from the start. Just takes a lot of planning and a lot of dollars. I would encourage everybody to vote for it.
Any improvement always includes a high dollar amount, but it's progress and movement forward, and we need to stay focused on that. I think I would encourage the vote for and to support it myself. So
I have a daughter who, if we could go back 20 years, she would still be around here, and she's in St. Paul because of the fact that she has a business now that requires very quick internet and conference calls nationwide. And so forth. So I have a best interest in it myself. So.
okay. Any more comments or anything on the issue we've been discussing?
I have one more thing, Mike, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
So also just to put it on your radar, moving forward for your approval at this month's board meeting will be updated board rules. They will not effectively take place until after December 1 because these board rules are the changes needed for going from 24 members to 20. We're also doing the restructuring of the committees in these board rules, which again will take place after December 1. But also included in these new board rules are going to be the process and guidelines for the digital or electronic voting using your tablets. So my goal for this would be that, again, after December 1, we begin using those tablets up here on one of these monitors. When you push your tablet that says yes, no, or abstain, it will display up here. So in order to get us there, we need to have rules that guide us as to how that process is going to take place. In the meantime, once we get these up and running, and they should be by your next October meetings, then I think we'll be doing some testing of the system. We won't officially be using it, but we'll be testing it. So you'll be using your tablets to actually place votes on the things that come before the committees or the full board. But in the meantime, for this week, what I'm asking you to do is to review those board rules specific to that area. Well, the whole board rules, but if you can only have a limited amount of time, narrow it down to the procedures for voting. I put together what I think is what you would want, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So please review. Charlie did give me a review, so I've got some tweaks to make based on his comments, which I haven't had a time to review just yet. So there'll be some probably some changes forthcoming from his advice. But if you have any, I'd like to incorporate it in before we get to the full board next week. So please let me know. That's it, I promise.
Might be.
I promise.
I'm not done yet.
I promise, I'm done.
I may spark something else for you. I owe you an apology for overlooking you as administrator for department head comments. And having done that and having put them in the new arrangement that they are, I love it, but I think you need to be included on here in alphabetical order so that I don't do this again.
So just for the record, you don't owe anybody an apology. This is Becky and I putting this together. And again, if you'd seen how many times we reworded this, it's like, but yes, Mike, you're right. We need to get a place on the agenda for that.
So I follow confusion well then.
You did great.
Okay, if there's no other comments, I entertain a motion to adjourn. So wait a minute. So motion by Keene, seconded by Mr. Scrogstad. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, everybody. Sorry for a little bit of confusion, but hey, comes with the age.